Story: The night she stopped loving him. It was a Tuesday night, one of those quiet evenings when the city seemed to exhale and slow down. Claire sat in the kitchen, sipping chamomile tea, waiting for her husband Daniel to return from yet another late meeting. Over the past few months, those meetings had become more frequent, his explanations more vague, and his kisses at the door more distracted. She had brushed it off for weeks. They had been together for 12 years. Surely they could survive whatever this was. But something deep inside whispered that the man she loved was slowly drifting away, and she wasn't sure if he wanted to be found. That night, she noticed he'd left his work laptop on the counter. She didn't plan to look, but her hands moved before her conscience could stop them. She opened his email. And there it was. Dozens of messages. Some innocent at first, just friendly banter with a colleague named Emily S. But as she scrolled further back, the tone changed. I can't stop thinking about you. Last night was amazing. And finally, soon, I'll tell her. We can be together without hiding. Claire's hands trembled. Her breath grew shallow. She closed the laptop and stared at the wall. Everything, their late-night talks, the vacations, the shared laughter, suddenly felt like a cruel joke. She didn't confront him right away. Instead, she played her role perfectly. She smiled at dinners, listened to his stories, and kissed him goodnight. But inside, she was building her own quiet revenge. She began keeping records, emails, text screenshots, bank statements showing expensive dinners she'd never been to. 3 weeks later, she invited friends, family, and even Daniel's business partners for what she described as a special announcement dinner. The house was filled with laughter and wine, the table covered in candles and fresh flowers. Daniel beamed, thinking perhaps she had planned a celebration for him. When dessert was served, Claire stood up. I have something to show you all, she said softly. The room went silent as the lights dimmed and a slideshow began on the TV. The first image appeared, Daniel laughing, his arm around Emily at a bar. Then screenshots of their messages. Hotel receipts. Photos from weekends away. Gasps filled the room. Daniel's smile collapsed. He tried to speak, but no words came. Claire looked at him for a long moment, her voice steady. I loved you once, Daniel. But that was before tonight. She walked out, leaving him frozen in the middle of the wreckage. That was the night she stopped loving him, and the night he realized she had been the one holding his entire life together. The next morning, the sun rose like nothing had happened. But inside Daniel's world, the light felt harsher, the air heavier. Claire was gone. Not just from the house, her clothes, her photographs, even the little notes she used to leave in his lunchbox were missing. She had erased herself with surgical precision. Daniel sat at the dining table, staring at the untouched coffee she'd left behind. His phone buzzed relentlessly, missed calls from friends, awkward messages from colleagues, even a short, unapologetic text from Emily, guess you'll have to figure things out now. But Claire had been thorough. By the time he logged into his bank account, half of it was gone. The house, he soon learned, had been in her name for years. His business partners, embarrassed by last night's spectacle, began to distance themselves. Meanwhile, Claire was in a small coastal town 2 hours away. She rented a modest apartment with a view of the ocean and began working remotely for a design firm. The sound of the waves at night replaced the silence she used to endure beside Daniel. She wasn't exactly happy yet, but she was free. Weeks turned into months. Daniel tried calling her once, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of desperation. She didn't answer. He sent her a long email, apologizing, promising change, begging for one more chance. Claire read it, smiled faintly, and pressed delete. On the anniversary of their wedding, she went for a walk along the pier. The wind tangled her hair as she realized something. She didn't regret a single thing she had done. He had destroyed their marriage with lies, but she had ended it with truth. And somewhere, Daniel sat alone in a dimly lit apartment, haunted by the slideshow of his own betrayal, knowing that the best thing he'd ever had walked away without looking back. Part 3. When their eyes met again. 5 years had passed since that night. Claire had built a life she could finally call her own. Her apartment by the sea had become a small sanctuary, sunlight spilling through the windows each morning, shelves lined with books she loved, the faint scent of coffee and salt water always in the air. She no longer thought about Daniel every day. The memories had softened, dulled by time and distance. But one chilly autumn afternoon, as she walked into a small bookstore in the city, fate decided otherwise. She was reaching for a novel when she heard a voice behind her. "Claire." She froze. Slowly, she turned. There he was, Daniel. Older, thinner, his once confident smile replaced by something quieter, almost fragile. He was holding a paper cup of coffee, as if it were the only thing anchoring him to the moment. For a second, neither spoke. The air between them felt heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. "You look different," he said finally, a sad smile touching his lips. "I am different," she replied, her voice calm. They ended up sitting at a small cafe across the street. He told her his life had fallen apart after the divorce, his business collapsed, friendships dissolved, and Emily had left within months. He admitted, for the first time, that losing her was the biggest mistake he'd ever made. Claire listened, but her heart felt no pull toward the man in front of her. She wasn't angry anymore, just detached. When he finally asked if they could start over, she smiled gently and shook her head. "I already have," she said, standing up. She walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement, leaving Daniel in the cafe's dim light, staring at the empty chair where she'd been. This time, she didn't look back either. Part 4. The Life She Chose. Months after that brief encounter with Daniel, Claire found herself thinking less and less about the past. Instead, her focus shifted entirely to the present, the small, beautiful details that made up her days. One rainy afternoon, she sat in her favorite cafe by the sea, sketching designs for a client. The door opened, and a gust of wind swept in along with a tall man in a navy coat. He ordered coffee, then glanced around the room. Their eyes met for only a second, but it was enough for her to feel a spark. Not the kind that consumes you instantly, but the kind that warms slowly, like a sunrise. Over the next weeks, she began seeing him more often at the cafe, at the local market, even on the pier where she liked to walk at sunset. His name was Michael, a writer who had moved to town after leaving a high-pressure corporate life. Their conversations were effortless, their silences comfortable. One evening, as the tide rolled in and the sky burned with shades of pink and gold, Michael turned to her. "You have this way of looking at the world," he said, "like you've seen it at its worst, and decided to love it anyway." Claire smiled. For the first time in years, she felt her heart open, not to fill a void, not to erase a wound, but simply because she wanted to. By the time spring arrived, her life was no longer defined by the betrayal she had endured. It was defined by the choices she made after. She realized the greatest revenge had never been exposing Daniel. It was living a life so full and genuine that his absence was nothing more than a distant shadow. And somewhere in another city, Daniel still thought about her. But Claire, she was too busy living.